In the harsh and unforgiving wilderness, survival is never guaranteed, even for the king of beasts. The African savanna, vast and golden under the blazing sun, hides countless dangers behind its beauty. Among the most relentless of these dangers are wild dogs, fast, coordinated, and merciless hunters that rely on teamwork and endurance rather than sheer strength. It is here that a powerful yet heartbreaking story unfolds, one that shows the true meaning of sacrifice, courage, and instinct. A lone lion stood at the edge of a dry riverbed, his golden mane rippling slightly in the hot wind. He was not alone, though. Hidden behind a cluster of tall grass nearby was a small lion cub, fragile, innocent, and unaware of the deadly tension building in the air. The cub was everything to him. Whether he was the father or simply a guardian of the pride, his instincts told him one thing clearly: protect the cub at all costs. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, came the eerie calls of African wild dogs. Their high-pitched chirps and coordinated movements signaled danger. Unlike lions, wild dogs hunt in packs, using strategy and persistence to wear down even the strongest prey. They do not fear confrontation when they outnumber their opponent, and today, their eyes were set on an opportunity. The lion's ears twitched, catching every sound. He knew what was coming. His body tensed, muscles coiled like springs ready to explode. He glanced back at the cub, who looked at him with wide, trusting eyes. There was no time to move the cub far enough to safety. The wild dogs were closing in too quickly. The pack appeared over the ridge, their lean bodies moving in perfect synchronization. There were many of them, far too many for even a strong adult lion to handle alone. Still, the lion did not run. Instead, he stepped forward, placing himself directly between the approaching danger and the hidden cub. The wild dogs spread out, encircling him. They knew their strength lay in numbers. One darted forward, testing the lion's reaction. With a powerful swipe of his paw, the lion sent it tumbling back. For a moment, it seemed like his sheer presence might be enough to intimidate them. But wild dogs are not easily discouraged. They regrouped quickly, their strategy shifting. Instead of a direct attack, they began to harass him from all sides. One would dart in to nip at his legs, then retreat before he could strike. Another would approach from behind, forcing him to turn and expose his flank. It was a relentless, exhausting tactic designed to wear him down. The lion roared, a deep, thunderous sound that echoed across the plains. It was a warning, a declaration of strength. But the wild dogs pressed on. They knew that if they stayed persistent, even the king could fall. Time passed, and the lion's movements began to slow. Each swipe of his paw became less precise. Each turn took a fraction longer. The wild dogs noticed. Their attacks grew bolder, more aggressive. Blood began to stain the lion's golden fur, each wound a mark of his struggle. Yet through it all, he did not retreat. He did not attempt to flee. Instead, he deliberately moved further away from the tall grass where the cub was hidden. Every step he took drew the wild dogs with him, pulling them away from the vulnerable life he was protecting. It was a conscious decision, driven by instinct and love. He was becoming a living shield, a distraction, a sacrifice. The cub remained hidden, trembling but silent. It did not fully understand what was happening, but it could sense the danger and the courage of the lion standing against it. The wild dogs intensified their assault. They circled tighter, their attacks more coordinated than ever. One latched onto the lion's hind leg, forcing him to stumble. Another seized the opportunity to bite at his shoulder. The lion roared again, but this time there was pain in his voice. Despite his injuries, he fought on. Each movement, each strike, was a desperate attempt to buy more time. Time for the cub to remain unseen. Time for the pack to lose interest or be drawn far enough away. But nature can be cruel. The lion's strength was fading. His breathing grew heavy, each breath a struggle. The wild dogs sensed victory. Their movements became faster, more confident. They had worn him down, just as they intended. And still, he did not give up. In his final moments of strength, the lion made one last push. He charged forward, forcing the wild dogs to scatter momentarily. It was not an attack meant to win, it was a final act of defiance, a statement that he would not go quietly. Then, as his energy finally gave out, he collapsed. The wild dogs closed in, their relentless nature taking over. But even as they surrounded him, their focus remained entirely on the lion. The cub, hidden and untouched, was forgotten. And that was the point. The lion had succeeded. He had drawn all attention to himself, ensuring that the cub would survive. In the brutal balance of the wild, Where survival often demands impossible choices, he made the ultimate one. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the savanna, the wild dogs eventually moved on. Their hunger temporarily satisfied, they disappeared into the horizon. Silence returned. From the tall grass, the small cub slowly emerged. It looked around cautiously, its tiny form dwarfed by the vast landscape. The danger had passed, but the world had changed forever. The cub approached the place where the lion had made his stand. Though it could not fully understand the sacrifice, it felt the absence, the loss, and perhaps, deep within, the strength that had been passed on. In the wild, stories like this are rarely seen but often lived. They are not told with words but with actions, acts of bravery and sacrifice that define the true essence of survival. This lion's final stand was not just a fight against overwhelming odds. It was a testament to instinct, to protection, and to a bond that goes beyond fear. In giving everything, he ensured that life would continue. And somewhere on the endless plains, that small cub would grow, carrying within it the legacy of a lion who chose sacrifice over survival. The night settled over the savanna like a heavy blanket, bringing with it a strange mix of calm and uncertainty. The heat of the day faded, replaced by a cool breeze that whispered through the tall grass. Under the dim glow of the moon, the small lion cub stood alone for the first time, surrounded by a world that suddenly felt much larger and far more dangerous. The silence was unsettling. Only hours ago, the air had been filled with roars, growls, and the frantic energy of survival. Now, there was nothing but the distant calls of nocturnal creatures and the soft rustling of the wind. The cub's ears flicked at every sound, its tiny body tense with fear and confusion. It took a few hesitant steps forward, glancing back again and again, as if expecting the lion to rise and follow. But that moment would never come. The reality of the wild is harsh. There are no second chances, no miracles waiting to undo what has already happened. Driven by instinct, the cub began to move. It stayed low, just as it had seen before, using the tall grass as cover. Every movement was cautious, every step deliberate. The memory of the wild dogs lingered like a shadow in its mind, even if it could not fully understand what they were. Hunger soon began to creep in. The cub's stomach tightened, reminding it that survival was not just about avoiding danger, it was also about finding food. But it was too young to hunt, too inexperienced to fend for itself. The odds were stacked heavily against it. As the night deepened, the cub heard something that made it freeze in place, a low, distant roar. It wasn't the same as the one it had heard earlier. This roar was different, unfamiliar, yet powerful. It belonged to another lion. Hope and fear mixed within the cub. Lions could mean safety, or danger. In the wild, not all lions are allies. Some see unrelated cubs as threats or competition. Still, the cub had little choice. Alone, it would not survive long. Carefully, it began to move toward the sound. The journey was slow and exhausting. The cub stumbled more than once, its small legs struggling to keep up with the distance. But it pressed on, guided by instinct and the faint echo of the roar. The moonlight illuminated parts of the landscape, revealing scattered trees, dry patches of earth, and the endless stretch of grassland. After what felt like hours, the cub finally saw them, a small group of lions resting beneath an acacia tree. A pride, there were lionesses lying close together, their eyes alert even as they rested. A large male lion sat slightly apart, his silhouette strong and commanding. The cub stopped at a distance, unsure of what to do next. It let out a soft, uncertain call. The reaction was immediate. The lionesses lifted their heads, their ears focused sharply on the sound. The male lion stood up slowly, his gaze locking onto the tiny figure in the distance. The cub froze, every instinct telling it to run, but it didn't. It couldn't. One of the lionesses began to approach, her movements cautious but not aggressive. She circled slightly, studying the cub, picking up its scent. There was something familiar there, the scent of another lion, one who had fought recently, one who was now gone. The cub lowered its head, letting out another small sound. For a moment, everything seemed uncertain. Then, something changed. The lioness's posture softened. She moved closer, sniffing the cub gently before nudging it with her nose. It was not a gesture of rejection, it was acceptance. The tension in the air eased. The other lionesses watched carefully, but none intervened. The male lion remained alert, his presence dominating, but he did not approach aggressively. Perhaps he understood, in his own way, the story carried by the cub's scent. The cub had found a chance. Over the next few days, life began to take on a new rhythm. The cub stayed close to the lioness who had accepted it, rarely straying far from her side. She provided warmth, protection, and eventually, food. Though the cub was not her own, her instincts to nurture were strong. The pride moved together across the savanna, always alert, always aware of the dangers around them. The cub learned quickly. It watched how the lionesses communicated, how they moved during hunts, how they protected one another. Every lesson was vital. Sometimes, in the distance, the cub would hear the haunting calls of wild dogs again. Each time, it would press closer to the lioness, its body tensing with a fear it now understood more clearly. The memory of that day, the sacrifice that had saved it, was etched deep within. As weeks turned into months, the cub grew stronger. Its legs became steadier, its movements more confident. It began to play with other young members of the pride, learning skills that would one day help it survive on its own.